Hey guys, how are you? Been a while since I've done a reset sniper chat with you, and so it's long overdue. And there's a number of topics that have been really out there that have been looming large. In fact, there's so much I could have spoken about and should have spoken about potentially, and yet haven't. It's just so much to cover. We're doing the traditional markets on themarketsniper.com. By the way, that's our website. Go book a chat if you want to come on board and learn how to trade with us. Follow on the Market Sniper Twitter as well. But I'm actually talking about the YouTube. So we've been looking at traditional markets, silver, gold, FX, all sorts of things. We've released some equity trades that are short on the oil services side. We've discussed some of the reasons why. Crypto Sniper, we've been following Bitcoin and following its 10,000 spill to the 6,800s level and wondering, what's coming next. So the Reset Sniper, there's been things happening, and it's time I paid it some attention. But I wanted to discuss two primary thoughts with you in this particular YouTube. I want to address debt in the USA specifically because it's the de facto dollar world currency, and that's why it's interesting, and still the largest economy officially. How does it play out on the dollar, including discussions on the dollar milkshake theory, and also how the dollar eventually potentially loses its strength and power and significance in a global economy. And then I'm going to talk to you a little bit about my thoughts as to blockchain. Where does it come in with this, and Bitcoin, and the overall reset, and then the concept of what I see coming for us in terms of people as landowners, as small landlords, and where the control structure in a forward-looking sense are taking us in terms of what they want and how they're going to achieve it. So where those points of squeeze are going to come in. Now I'm in a hotel lobby. Forgive the good repartee and background chuckle. I'll make sure I speak nice and loud, and I'm using, for want of a better word, a mic. But you will hear a little bit of big background chatter. So, a couple of things. First of all, debt. Many people don't know that actually during the formative stage of America, they actually paid off all their debt once. And you also won't know that they have had very high debt levels before, during the Civil War period and the First World War periods. They went quite high. So many people, this is in debt to GDP, by the way, so debt to GDP. So we've got to get over looking at the absolute volume of debt because currencies are being deflated away in their value immensely. We've got to look at debt relative to GDP. In other words, what's created and what the value is. So you've got to look at all benchmarks. Now, many of you may not be aware, but actually when Jimmy Carter stood down, that wasn't so long ago, he left with debt to, I'm talking about jets and debts, I'm mixing my metaphors big time here. Debt in Jimmy Carter's era, when he finished his presidency, was 32.5% of GDP. Now that is highly manageable, and when you add further new debt, actually you still can get, if that's invested correctly and wisely, you can still get more GDP growth than debt being accrued to your level. So you can get a bigger kick for that new debt that you've added. There's a key level where it becomes a problem, and that's the Reinhardt and Rogart level of 90%. Now, you might say, but, you mentioned that these kind of debts have hit those levels before, during wars. Yes, and the reason why America recovered from them is that they were on the ascendancy as a major nation. They were selling loads of goods, they had trade surpluses, and demographically, they were a young nation dealing with older nations demographically. They were also providing lots of goods, tobacco, grains, lots of aspects like that, and their manufacturing was gaining and scaling and actually they were net exporters largely. Now, during the war, they financed a lot of the war. Let's not get into that one and who was behind that, but they made a lot of things. They sold a lot of items. They were doing great business selling weapons, steel, etc., to the older European nations mired in debt and in the war itself before joining the war themselves. So they had the benefit of increasing productivity and positive demographics. This went right into the boomer generation, who are the first-born kids of those that fought in the war generation. And they started all retiring around about 2008. So the oldest boomers started retiring around about 2008. And the next generation, which was a lot smaller, which is the one I am in, Generation X, kind of bridges 68 from about mid-60s, 64. I think you're a boomer if you're born before 64 and later into the 50s and late 40s. So this was a pig in the python. And actually, Bill Clinton didn't pay off all the debt, but he did produce a surplus, and it was the last time a surplus was perpetuated. And that was when the overall biggest demographic of the population was all at 47 years old, deemed the most productive period of your life. So you're buying goods for your kids, you've got probably your best and biggest home, you're buying cars, and you're paying a bunch of tax. You're paying a whole bunch of tax, you're productive, and you've got a senior job. After there, they started aging, and this is where we are now. The boomers started retiring from 2008, and of course now we're 11 years into that retirement, so more and more boomers are going into the retirement era. Now, debt to GDP, if I can just get to say that right, debt to GDP, and not involve Jimmy Carter and jets involved in that, debt to GDP is a key measure, but now when productivity is low and sinking, and the demographics have changed. In other words, the number of people, I did this around about the recession in the 30s, there were approximately, I think, 33 people for every one pensioner in the 30s when they had the Great Depression. Now we've got 3 or 4 working age people for every pensioner. So the off-balance sheet items that have been accumulating, that have been an actuarial nightmare, and have continued to escalate in the States, that have been ignored because politically no one wants to deal with it, the welfare, Medicare, etc. And Roosevelt, who brought them in following the Great Recession, the little bit of communism that did get in was the government commitment to pay the equivalent of welfare and a little bit of state pension. And this set the trigger for where you are now today. But the problem is many presidents had an opportunity to deal with this and never did. And at the time it was introduced, it was the usual thin edge of a wedge. It was affordable at that point in time. It wasn't outlandish, but it was something that would continue to escalate and grow. And when you have a demographic boom and then a subsequent bust and they're getting older, you should recognize that the allocations that are required to cover these elements that are not in the debt, these are the unbudgeted for welfare, Medicare, and Medicaid items, start to escalate ever higher. And they're largely going to go bust. I think the latest guesstimate from the own American government statistics department is that by 2027 they'll be bust. They won't be able to make any further payments officially. So for those that are wondering if we are having a reset, you absolutely will have before that long stop date. It has to happen. Otherwise, you're just going to plow to that point, assuming nothing else fails before, and you're going to reach a point where, well, guess what? We can't pay the pensions. And borrow, well, who's going to lend to them to pay pensions? That's not productive borrowing. That's just an escalating debt that you know they can't pay, that continues to get bigger. Medical costs continue to get higher in the States, and bad and worse value. And in the end, no one's going to lend you money just to pay your pensioners. It's not productive. It's not plant. It's not new roads. It's not airports. It's not gonna increase productivity. It's just giving an old codger's gin and tonic and a pork pie each day to eat in front of the telly while he watches, WrestleMania or something, or whatever old people do watch on the big distraction TV. So Carter, 32.1. Now, actually, that equated to George Washington's first term in 1790. So in terms of debt to GDP, despite some bump up, and Krugman will love this, he'll always say, but we've been here before and we came back. These are just, the fiscal conservatives, the nasty austerity people. We should print and pretend and keep borrowing, etc., and march on. What was different then, that doesn't apply now, is the fact that you've got terrible demographics and you've got terrible productivity. In other words, you're an advanced, mature economy that is now battling and is facing other advanced, mature economies. And you have younger economies like Indonesia, for example, where they have young age people, that they are going to have their growth and their demographic spike. And this is something Harry Dent always highlights. Demographics drive growth very strongly, a big core factor in it. And the state's demographics are stale. Fertility is dropping and is decreasing, etc., etc. So what happens? What happens? How's this all play out? So I've sketched this whole thing. We've gone from 32 to officially 105%, but as I've already mentioned, it's more like, and we've had guesstimates from Boston professors, that's around 600%, and that was about 3 or 4 years ago, to some people saying it's now well through 800, 900% debt to GDP with the obligations that are unfunded taken into account. So how does this end, basically? Because the whole point of this is, why are we discussing this? This is history. History is very useful when you look back to look forward. So what have we got? Well, absent higher growth, which isn't going to come due to the demographics and the declines in productivity, the only way to escape for America from this debt dilemma are default, out and out. We ain't paying no more. We can't do it. Sorry. That's honest. Honesty don't come into the agenda of deception. The agenda of deception is not based around honesty, and I don't see it happening. So you've got out and out default. We could have some pockets of out and out default in areas where they think, we'll take the knock on that. We'll just say, stuff you can't pay, bye, and we can do it. Certain things will be, potentially they'll be able to get away with, especially if they create a problem, reaction, solution environment so intense and so unthinkable that outrageous things are likely to be occurring. Then there's inflation. Now this one's almost certainly going to play a role. Inflation is the thief that comes and takes away from everyone. This is where they proliferate currency, they print more of it, and they up the cost of everything substantially, and your relative incomes go down, and they print and they make their debt smaller by devaluing it. And by compounding a higher than normal inflation, they actually whittle away debt payments. Britain suffered immensely once it lost its pound dominance and had the debt to pay back from the wars, from the Marshall Plan. But actually the final payment that was only paid in after the millennium was fairly small, but it had been a huge millstone around their neck for absolute decades. The whole 60s, the roaring 60s, girls were painting gravy on their legs to look like they had stockings. I mean, we're talking about austerity. You had a coat, you fixed it, you wore it for 15 years until it fell apart before you bought a new one. This was the austerity era. This was what debt brought, and this is what loss of the primary currency brings. What else? So inflation, in my opinion, is almost certainly going to happen, and it's going to come through this green agenda. The green agenda is here right now for us all, for you to see how they are going to do QE for the saving the planet. Because it's like voting against motherhood to say you shouldn't be doing that. I mean, don't you want to save the planet? What about the children that follow you? The watermelon communism is how they are going to assert and justify the continuous QE for carbon neutral based products, environment, world, which to some degree will, I'm sure, occur and will lead to the position where they are now consistently doing quantitative easing to support their pet green projects, for which they will hold all the keys, all their own hedge funds, institutions. They will be shareholders in these new green tech. They will get all these huge largesse of government subsidies, and you will be in your traditional industries, wherever you work now, still, and you will have your currency devalued, your savings devalued, and your income devalued. You'll be dragged into ever higher tax brackets, because if they double the amount of money, and instead of doubling your income, they increase it by 50%, you're going to be paying more tax because you're going to be dragged. It's called bracket creep, because most places have marginal tax rates. So you're going to be taxed more, and you're going to feel less wealthy all the way. So inflation is definitely going to play a role. So we've covered default. I think in select areas there might be out and out default with the US when it loses its dollar dominance hegemony. I think inflation is assured, and that's going to affect everyone, and quantitative easing and the watermelon communism is going to play part of that. What else? Asset sales. Now that's kind of the humiliating bit. That's kind of what happened to Greece. I think there will be a bit of egg and chin for the states. Maybe they will have to sell a few ports and a few things and realign it. And guess who will be owning those new structures that will become the new New York Harbor and Ports Authority that was the Rockefellers, essentially, whom they ceded to the Ports Authority, which they essentially still controlled, built the 9/11 towers on, and then brought them back down again, etc., etc. So who do you think is going to be behind those asset sales? Who will be owning those key networks, doing the Sri Lanka, China versus Sri Lanka, owning the island, owning the ports, the German to the Greek islands, and owning their airports and their items? Who do you think is going to own it? Owning the gold, potentially, because who owns the gold makes the rules. That's the golden rule. So there's definitely potentially going to be scope for some asset sales, a little bit of humility. There's always humiliation when you lose, like the British, the hegemony of global currency. I mean, the British used to have a space program and put satellites into space. They walked away from all of these things, these big investments. They ceased to be this military power, and they had to walk away from many pet projects and technologically leading ones for debt and financial reasons. So we've covered product default, inflation, and we've also covered asset sales. What about, and this is another one for you to contemplate, IMF World Money Bailout, aka the Special Drawing Rights, SDR. So they want to transnationalize and cauterize, or should I say castrate more accurately, national governments. This is a boring thing. You've got to coordinate all these national governments and tell them what they've got to do for the big boss. It would be so much nicer if national governments and national currencies didn't exist, and we had a handful of ways of accepting money, some of which were Bitcoin and blockchain. You could have your favorite blockchain coin, which also gave a certain amount of loyalty points to your favorite charity and things like that that you could pay with every time you wanted to purchase, and 3 or 4 fiat, global fiat, or the SDR as a blockchain available at a later point currency. Now, for those of you who think the SDR, nothing's ever happened to it, the SDR has and did set a precedent and got involved in 2008 and was involved in certain bailouts, and essentially they have no money at all. It's just a new layer of governmental bureaucracy that transcends. So IMF transcends us apparently over all current countries. They create this new layer of government, kind of like the Euro state, EU, over all of European countries, and everybody pays in and has to stand behind it. So they create a portfolio of rotten sticks, and they say, look, this is a strong bundle of sticks. But the problem is, if you have lots of shit and you combine it and you portfoliorize it, it's still backed by shit. There isn't an alchemy process that when you portfolioize broken things, that they suddenly become strong. You can't make an airplane wing out of fatigued, broken, damaged metal that is not conjoined strongly and rigid without any seams of weakness. But they will tell you that they can, and all these broken, over-indebted, all fall down perfectly synchronized indebted nations will be portfolioized, and now you can have an SDR. And by branding and creating a same name, they'll be selling you lots of different stinky pieces of poo as this item that is now alchemized to be trusted. Because it's not just America. It's not just because you don't have to have Trump's currency. He's a nasty man, orange man, bad. You know, you can have the SDR, which is a hybrid. It's a hybrid of everybody. You get a little bit of everybody, and according to weightings, and it's backed by the United Nations, the International Monetary Fund, not America. This is international. This has got China, Japan, everybody behind it. Even though they're all sick, they're all lepers in the leper colony. It's like playing the Rugby World Cup final, and you've got a pack of forwards and they're all leopards with one leg, and bits of them are falling off. But you've got numbers, and it's not just one specific leper that you don't like, an orange man bad and something wrong with him. You've got a scrum full of lepers to pack down with. Now you're going to be strong. You know, this is the great alchemy that's going to be coming, and the SDR might indeed play a part of that. So that's my rant on that, and it's not going to save you, but it's going to be sold to you as clean, low volatility, because as one thing goes up, other things will be going down. It's going to be balanced. It's this, you know, they'll sprinkle in maybe a little bit of gold into that. Each nation will pledge a certain amount of their gold, so you'll think, you know, that'll keep the gold bugs happy and saying, well, no one can print gold. They'll sprinkle in, who knows, they might even include a bit of Bitcoin if they want to start proliferating. But I think this happens before we get the huge blockchain uptick. But as part of the reset and as part of the merging currencies failing, I think we get a run into the dollar. So I think the dollar milkshake will first occur. First it goes up before it goes down. So when we all fall down, a lot of money will run into the dollar, but a lot I'm expecting will also go into blockchain assets, particularly Bitcoin. And as a result, these cryptos will run up. They will run up as well. Gold will run up, and the dollar initially will run up until its final domino day, because things collapse from the periphery in. Think of a circle of bad currencies. Small ones, emerging ones on the outside, they get attacked first by the barbarian hordes, and as you get deeper in, the bigger dominoes, and the final and largest is in the middle. But as those littler dominoes fall, they first push upwards the ones in the middle, and then we get a situation where the dollar then faces not being able to make its own debts as well, and we get the SDR, this new SDR created element. So lots of turmoil. I now want to talk about land and property ownership. There's no doubt. In fact, I know someone who's a landlord in Berlin, Germany, and they're facing a situation where the Berlin municipal government is saying, no, you can't charge your 2,500 euro for your beautiful apartment in the nicest part of Berlin. You can only charge a following amount. 10 euro per square meter times by the number of square meters. And if that means it's now 1,000, that means that's all you're allowed to charge. And they're doing this. And this is being trialed in Berlin because there's a shortage. Amazing. You want to deal with a shortage of rental? You cap the amount of rent that landlords can get. Now, if you think that's going to make new landlords come in, you're absolutely wrong. So if someone's going to get 1,000 euro where previously they got 2,500 euro and they're not living in that apartment, in actual fact, the value to them as a landlord in terms of the net present value of those income streams has literally been divided by 2.5. So what does that do? It probably will cause them to be forced sellers. And I'm expecting small landlords the world over. It's happening in Britain. It used to be great to be a landlord in Britain. The small landlord is being squeezed out of the property market. Get the goyim off the land, off the properties. Make them all tenants in their own country. This is a saying, a quote. You need to go research where it comes from and how and who's behind it. But I've already seen Vitalik in Ethereum talking about Ethereum playing a role and everyone having to state the value of their property when they pay their rates, and if they understate, it's a contract and someone can come and purchase your property for understating your valuation. So you either pay higher rates by making sure you're always quoting the same amount, or predatory people through the blockchain can bid and have you out of your home. This is a concept document being discussed by a Zionist with Vitalik Buterin about it's not the time for people to own. People should just rent and share and move and screw ownership and all of this. And guess what? You're going to be turned into a tenant in your own country, your own life. In China already, when you buy extortionately expensive property at ridiculous prices of shoddy quality. So I was talking to a Chinese friend who saw me speak here, and he was saying the quality is awful, quickly thrown together, exceedingly expensive, incredible density and low life quality, excessive traffic, and you only own it for your lifespan. You actually get 90 years, and then it reverts back to states. That level of communism that is being trialed in China is coming for all of us. The small landlords will be made to get out the game. And how do you do it? You just keep screwing them at a legal basis. You remove all any tax incentives. You can't deduct your mortgage payments anymore. You increase the tax. You spoil capital gains allowances for it. You make exceedingly friendly tenant-based laws that people can squat easily in a socialist, communist plethora where landlords have a nightmare getting non-payers out. This is the game. This is the game that's happening in the world at the moment, and this is where I think they're taking us. They want small and medium-sized landlords out, and you will be made to pay more if you insist on being a private owner of your own property. And in the future, and it's coming, they will be able to evict you for understating. You can be bought out of. No doubt there will be government-funded hedge funds that will be offering high prices for any property they deem that has been undervalued by the owner. They can de facto buy in it. And blockchain is going to bring in fractional ownerships of properties. And that is going to break up the concept of having a title deed and being an exclusive owner to a property. And this is the direction that I feel that, and these are the worrying trends that I feel that are coming. And this is the global communism, this corporatocracy-driven communism. I say often, the likes of Apple, Microsoft, and all of these, the notion that all these companies started in a garage and it was just true entrepreneurial chutzpah and spirit and worked their way up, Facebook, all of this. They started in these skull and bones universities. There were predecessor companies that existed that were trialing this concept. The notion that these are all just built by individuals and that they haven't had immense support, bottomless overdrafts. Amazon ran losses for infinity years before they finally turned a profit. Who was covering and paying all that? Who was backing all of these people? Elon Musk is another character who's the latest of unicorns with a bottomless overdraft that can keep operating space stations and space plans and rockets launches, car companies, battery companies, and everything under the sun, and he never seems to get a margin call. Just go look at Epstein's banker and how he was provided with free overdrafts that he never paid, and you'll see when you're serving the control structure, these aren't to be deemed private companies. You should need to be more critical. You know, the notion that these guys were sitting there making their payrolls and growing and all of this and being cash generative from day one and always paying, absolute nonsense. They were carried, they were looked after. Trump was carried in his casino when he was on the wrong side of the property market by Chase Manhattan Bank, David Rockefeller, the chairperson, that merged into Citibank, and Citibank's now the banker to Epstein. So, you know, you just need to see the same organizations. The oligarchy of oil, absolute Rockefeller fractured. His wealth went up 2.5 times when they broke up Standard Oil, because he unleashed all the hidden value that was in them and he was still the owner of all the pieces. I mean, it's ridiculous. Guys, the notion that there is that free small guy that grows to be the head of a trillion market cap company. These guys are statist. They're absolutely statist because they are giving the government backdoor entries into your private words, discussions, searches. They're commercializing your data and they're spying on you and they surveillance. That is a parastatal spy corporate that has multitude of products and is serving the goals of government. That's why they pay so little tax. That's why there are rules that they can exploit, and that's why you don't get to pay those little amounts of tax. Anyway, watch out for those trends on property and watch out for those key ways that post the dollar milkshake spike in the dollar that we might go down for the US as they introduce the global or the broad transnational currency. that takes place of any one country, and how they will sell it to you as a portfolio theory benefit. In other words, you diversify it away. You'll have the prudent Japanese and the up and coming Chinese and the traditional British and all of these things. Meanwhile, they're all broken over indebted currencies, and it's a portfolio of crap, and that doesn't make it gold. But they'll sell you that as SDR, and it'll be backed by the taxpayers, you in all those nation states, which will have to make green watermelon communism based carbon payments to these higher organizations who will start to have income streams coming directly through you, because it's for the children. How can you not want for the children? We've destroyed the planet, and it's for the children, and the planet's going to die in 10 years. It's an emergency. We have to all pay, all power to the pump. It's ending, Look out for some freak weather events to hype this up. It's kind of like the London Bridge terrorist attack that both times happened just before an election, when everyone is bored as hell with the usual candidates and doesn't want to participate. Think. Anyway, I'll leave you with those two thoughts. Remember this. Pop on if you want to learn to trade this and you want to be part of us and you need true method, you want to be part of a community, wealth building in this. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. This is the Reset Sniper. Subscribe to it, follow the Twitter handles, grab our mini-series on how you can trade and exploit this. We've already discussed major currency moves, where they will fall first, and how we intend to speculate and make money there. Also, how you should be investing as well. So you have slow dough as well as some quick dough, and then slow dough is the best dough. It's in the precious metals, how you can do that, and what might happen with the precious metals trajectory, because it won't be straight up. There could be a dip first in the fear moments of the problem reaction solution. Pop on board. Maybe you need a community to help you with that. Book in and have a chat with one of us if you wish to learn more. Thanks for watching, and watch out for these key trends as they come their way. And unfortunately, blockchain will work against us as well, because it'll keep every legislated transaction. It's kind of like Modi killing all the small notes in his, all the big notes in his currency. He's forcing cash traders in India to all go electronic, have banking for tax and tracking of his citizenry. There was a huge, small, low-level income Indians that's got by on cash businesses, and they want their tax. They want their tax, and they want their data on what those people are doing, and they're forcing them into the electronic environment. And this is going to be part of the reason why they'll look to kill cash and watch out for negative interest rates and QE for the green agenda. Lots to worry about, and lots of opportunity in that as well. Speak to you later. Bye.